Hello, everybody.
From The Stranger, editor Chase Burns. Chase, welcome back. Good to see you.
Hello, hello, hello.
Political analyst and columnist Joni Balter. Joni, thanks for coming along today.
Happy Friday to all of you.
Happy Friday. Only one of us is wearing a coat today, and I know which one because I can see the live stream on YouTube and Facebook, and you can see us too by searching for KUOW Public Radio. Chase, are you still chilly from earlier this week when we set a new record low for the date of 36 degrees?
I am chilly, and to spoil it, I am wearing a jacket. I moved here from Minnesota, so I thought that I was like really strong against the cold, but I think after our hot summer, I've become a bit of a wimp, and I'm not looking forward to the heating bill, but you know what, we'll get through this. We're
gonna get through it. I might put on a hoodie here halfway through the show. We'll see. By the way, Mai, I saw that I was checking my phone just as we were about to start, and it's about the same temperature where you are in Yakima as it is in Seattle right now in the mid 50s. But did it get super cold on the east side of the state this week?
Yeah, it actually got to like below freezing for like a second, like in the 30 overnight lows in like the low 30s. So I personally don't mind it. It got, as you all know, it got up to like 114 here. And in Yakima, we get like 100-degree temperatures like all the time. So I actually am very happy that it's actually cold, and it's perfect running weather for me personally. So I'm pretty happy.
Excellent. Yeah, we've all adjusted. I feel like I got to readjust my desire. I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know if I want heat or rain or cold. I just don't know. I will say my sixth grader who only wears shorts, who says boys don't wear pants, actually had to find some earlier this week. But he is back to shorts today, though. Thank God. Okay, let's get at the news of the week and figure out what happened. Let's start with our local elections this week. We told you last week about an attack ad against Seattle mayoral candidate Bruce Harrell. Now there's an ad out against mayoral candidate Lorena Gonzalez that we learned about this week from KUOW's public politics reporter, David Hyde.
The ad starts with ominous music and a question.
What will Lorena Gonzalez do if elected mayor?
Among other things, the ad implies City Council President Lorena Gonzalez is responsible for 300 officers leaving the Seattle Police Department.
We can't use our parks, and we feel unsafe.
Gonzalez campaign spokesperson Alex Corrin says the ad's misleading. Last year, the City Council cut the police budget about 20%, not enough to explain 300 officers leaving. Gonzalez is open to defunding the police by 50% or more, but Corrin says she'd tie any future cuts to alternative funding to improve safety.
Everything that people need to know about this ad is in the disclaimer. The people are paying for it.
The ad was created by a PAC called Harrell for Seattle's Future, funded by large donations from real estate executives and other wealthy individuals.
Joni Balter, what do you make of this mayoral campaign so far?
Oh boy, I think it's going to be kind of close in the end there. I think we are into the silly season, as some of us were talking about before the show started. You're going to see some ads that are going to make you scratch your head. The one last week, tying Bruce Harrell to Donald Trump. That was a head scratcher because, just look at Bruce Harrell. He doesn't exactly remind me of Donald Trump. I don't see how you get there. This one is based on the one that you're mentioning. I did see this one is based on the idea that public safety is a big topic and that Lorena Gonzalez, as the incumbent council president, has something to do with that. She's not directly responsible for 300 officers leaving, but she's not responsible because she did support the defund 50%. So you have many council members supported that. And now there's blowback, and there's blowback across the country to this. This is not just in Seattle. You have actually New York Times reported, Wall Street Journal reported that what's happening in some cities that actually defunded or cut by 20% or some other number, that they're now hiring and adding police officers because of another trend that's going on, which is a rise in violent crime and murder and shooting. And we do have that here.
Chase, how about you? What do you want to say to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, don't you love this season, Bill? I think, like Joni said last week, we saw Lorena comparing Bruce to insurrectionists, and this week we've got Bruce suggesting that, or Bruce's pack suggesting that the whole city is unsafe because of Lorena. And I think obviously both of these are hyperboles and generalities, but they do get to key perspectives from both of the candidates. Lorena keeps pushing that Bruce is to the right of her politically, and Bruce is pushing that Lorena is responsible for crime and exits at SPD. I think that there's some truth in both of those, and I would encourage people to go to the candidates' websites and get into the details of their plans. Some of them are more detailed than others, and I am happy I don't have a TV, or at least I don't have regular cable. So I hopefully will miss most of these over the next few weeks.
Mai, I'm curious what it's like watching this Democrat on Democrat campaigning from where you are in Yakima.
I mean, it's really fascinating to me because my understanding is I've talked to my colleague at Crosscut, Dave Croman, about how they've actually voted on things in the city council. And it sounds like they don't depart very much from each other. I guess I think that's my impression, and so I feel like they're not that different, but they have to appeal to voters somehow, and this is, I guess, where we are now. Is it's we're kind of in a very polarizing political situation, and I think it's very natural to kind of do the in group out group and kind of put people guilty by association. So I think that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, in group, out group. Joni, you wanted to talk about where the money is coming from in these campaigns.
Well, that is what, so that's what the candidate Lorena Gonzalez definitely wants to talk about, because she keeps trying to say that, Bruce Harrell is tied to all these awful corporations. Couple of things on that. Bruce Harrell did not, he's not the summation of his donations in some ways. He has some folks in there. There's this guy who did donate, George Petrie, did donate to Harrell, but also donated to Jay Inslee, Dow Constantine, Joe Nguyen. I mean, but it's not an issue in these other races. It's an issue here. I also think when you look deep into who's donating money, you'll find some what you might call white hats in business here. You'll find someone like John Stanton. He happens to own the Mariners. He's in there for Bruce Harrell. You'll find some other folks in there. And then when you go to I do want to talk about the distinction between the funding for both campaigns. So when you look at the independent expenditures, which is where you see these big numbers, yes, Bruce Harrell has George Petrie, but you look at the essential workers for Lorena Gonzalez, the number changes, the percentage changes from time to time because people keep dumping money in there. But out-of-state unions are about half of the contributions there, from New York, from DC. And, I guess there's a difference between, out-of-state and foreign influence, which is a whole other topic. Lorena Gonzalez actually authored a bill to make sure no foreign influence, even the most minuscule amount of foreign influence, 1% stock ownership, like Amazon, could even participate in this election. And so it's very interesting when you get into this. So is it okay?
Did that actually keep Amazon from participating in the election?
Absolutely.
That's effective that way.
Now, remember, individuals
yes.
Can give, but as a corporation, Amazon is not contributing in this race. They can't, because of that bill it passed unanimously. So it was authored by Gonzalez, but it wasn't just her in sort of approving it.
I'm going to play a little bit of audio from last night's debate. Chase, is there anything you wanted to say about money in these campaigns?
Yeah, I guess I just, I personally, I don't find the national unions to be quite as much of an issue as Joni. I think Washington, prides itself on being a starter state. We test out a lot of policies that get exported around the country. $15 minimum wage is a great example. So, we attract national attention and workers have solidarity across the country. I think it's funny when we talk about corporations like Amazon and Starbucks being like local companies that are sort of restricted in participating. Because I think when you look at a company like Amazon, I mean, their ambitions aren't just, international, they're intergalactic. And so I think we can only stretch the word local to be so big.
Well, here's the deal on that, if I can just respond here for a second. So Amazon, yeah, worldwide company, of course, you're right. But here in Seattle, they employ something like 60,000 people. They pay taxes here. They cannot have a voice, but out-of-state unions can.
Let's shift to this. Here's something that Harrell and Gonzalez can agree on, is that Amazon should pay more. They were talking about Amazon at last night's debate, asked what to do about Amazon's outsized influence on Seattle's housing and infrastructure problems. So I'll start with the candidate, Bruce Harrell.
Well, number one, they have to pay their fair share of taxes. Number one. Number two, they have to align their corporate social responsibility goals with that of the city.
Now, one difference here is that Harrell says state lawmakers will raise taxes on Amazon and other businesses, while candidate Lorena Gonzalez says Seattle itself should raise Amazon's taxes.
I'm not going to punt to the state legislature to fix our revenue problems. We have an opportunity to do that here, and we should take it.
Gonzalez said she doesn't think Amazon is going to move jobs away to nearby cities over tensions with Seattle's government. Any reaction there?
Well, I thought that was a little smug in some ways. And the reason being that, there was a story, and this is what Council President Lorena Gonzalez was talking about. There was a story that said that this a couple of weeks ago, that 12,500 new jobs would come for Amazon would come to Seattle. Well, it turns out that's not the right number. It turns out that about a third of that is true. Some of that are backfills. In other words, people leaving Amazon, and they're just jobs that are open that have to be filled. Some of those are interns who are based out of Seattle, who go around the country, around the world. And some of those are Seattle area jobs. In other words, Bellevue and a few other locations, perhaps like Redmond. So it's not that they love us madly and will never rebel if we hit them again. And just by looking at, what they're doing, they're not leasing any more buildings in Seattle. They're not building any more buildings. A lot of the action is in Bellevue.
Yeah, I think last night, one of the things that was interesting is we saw two very experienced politicians running for office. And I say that because they both repeated nearly word for word attacks and points that we've heard them say in other debates. And one of the things that Bruce said that I've heard him say in other debates is that we'll sort of tap into corporations, and uses that verb tap a lot. And I think it sort of explains his perspective towards bigger businesses like Amazon. Bruce wants to work with them kind of more gently, and Lorena seems to think that we need to force their hand to provide contributions. And you see that play out a lot. You see Bruce talking a lot about, like he says, corporate social responsibility. And so, what's the corporation's social responsibility? And do we believe that they're going to participate and be responsible in that way? Or do we think that at the end of the day, a corporation like Amazon, the way that we've set up our country, it's ultimately driven by profits. And so is their attention going to be directed towards that, or directed towards Seattle, one city that they're a part of around the country and the globe?
To focus on Seattle a little more, and then Mai will talk about stuff that sort of spans the region and the state a little bit more. But I wondered if any of you had a reaction to Amazon's announcement this week that, after all, they are going to let their office employees work from home if they can work that out with their supervisor indefinitely. So it pushes off this time of the big return to places like South Lake Union. Any reaction?
Well, yeah, I think it's. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I would say it'll definitely be really interesting how companies, I think Amazon kind of leads and then other businesses follow. So if Amazon is saying, hey, you guys can work remotely indefinitely, other businesses are going to be like, okay, well, if Amazon's doing it, we should do it. So I could see a lot of companies like downsizing their offices. So having just enough space for the people that have to be in the office, and then maybe some space for like some charging stations for people that might, come in occasionally. So it could have a big impact in terms of, leases and office space and how much office space people rent out.
Sorry. In Amazon's policy, I think they said that it applies to like 60,000 workers. A lot of those workers have talked off the record and said that ultimately the decisions come down to their direct supervisor. And so it remains to be seen if direct supervisors are going to allow their teams to permanently work remotely. 60,000 is a big number, and that applies across the Puget Sound region. But we will see how it comes back to life. I think one quote that I read was from Seattle Coffee Works CEO Heather Schmidt, and she told the Seattle Times that her business can't rely on one company to be our supporters, that they're here for the entire community. And I thought a lot about that quote. Obviously, it's smart for businesses to sort of diversify their revenue streams in general. It shouldn't be relying on one company. But we have to think about that with downtown. I mean, the pandemic changed work from home policies. We never thought that we'd be doing the radio over Zoom in all of our homes. And a lot of these fixes work. And so we're going to see businesses adapt to that. And I think we are going to have to also adapt our downtown spaces and be open-minded about how we can use that open office space if it ends up staying open.
Generally, radio shows by Zoom work. Sometimes a guest like Joni drops away briefly, but I see her again. Welcome back, Joni. And we're talking about the impact of the Amazon decision. And of course, it's not just Amazon, but they're the big player saying that they're going to let people for an indefinite period of time, let office workers see if they can arrange a work from home with their supervisors.
So it's more like Microsoft leading Amazon around. If you look at it closely, I wrote a piece for Bloomberg Opinion about this, and yeah, it is really big news that they came to this. But they kept making these announcements. We will be back 3 days, 2 days, and it will be this day, and it will be that day, and this is who will decide, what days you are working in the office. And then Delta came along, and it just became absurd to keep saying a date that you're going to have to keep leapfrogging ahead because you didn't exactly know what the actual course would be for Delta. So it's really big news. They are somewhat following Microsoft in the sense that they're going to leave it entirely up to, quote, directors. Directors lead teams at Amazon and decide who will actually get to work from home for what period of time. So I do think this has huge ramifications for downtown Seattle. Amazon has all those buildings. They have said they're done building in Seattle, but they have those buildings. What are they going to do with them? We've seen a couple of stories even this week that there's a lot of tech company interest in large space leasing downtown. But, it's really going to change downtown if people are not going to come back. So I think the big action here is where the directors decide, are that many people really going to get to work at home indefinitely? Or are they just sort of done trying to take it from the top? I think that's it. But Microsoft has sort of been, and this has been going on for months here. Microsoft said that you could basically decide with your manager what you're going to do. And so they don't have a date now that you have to go back to work. They have different dates at different times that you have to work with your supervisor to decide how much, work from home is going to be reality.
As I said, we're going to move out from Seattle in a moment. Before we do that, I just want to talk about what's happening a little bit north of downtown. The first home game for the Kraken, the NHL team, is a week from Saturday, the 23rd, against our bitter rival from the wrong side of the border, the un-American Vancouver Canucks, daring to come in, the gall of them coming to Climate Pledge Arena. Chase, does everybody love the newly renovated Climate Pledge Arena and its effects?
Yeah, so one specific neighbor has raised some complaints this week. The Vera Project is one of the nearby neighbors to the Climate Pledge Arena. There's also KXP and SIF is nearby. And like a lot of the
film festival.
Yes, Seattle International Film Festival. They have a few locations. And like a lot of arts venues, the Vera Project has been shut down due to the pandemic, recently reopened, and that's its own burden. But they have brought to the media this week that they've had to deal with some unique construction issues related to the Climate Pledge Arena. And there's a kind of a really long list of grievances, but some of the things that they bring up is construction equipment has been blocking their entrances and emergency exits. Like their HVAC system was destroyed because of construction. They had hazardous fumes, extremely hot steam, they say, came into their building, forcing people to leave. Like there's a bunch of stuff that's happened that's prevented them from being able to reopen. They wanted to reopen on July 1st. They couldn't do that because of the construction. And they say that they anticipate that they're going to lose about $200,000 because of all of this. They've brought their complaints to the Seattle Center and to the Oakview Group, which is the construction company in charge of it. And the Seattle Center says that they've had several large meetings with the construction leads in Vera Project, and they've been meeting regularly to try to resolve some of these complaints. But I think ultimately, Vera Project feels like the responses have been inadequate. And I think they're looking for some sort of financial compensation. And I think what's symbolic about this, and the reason I think I'm really attracted to the story, is because you have Vera Project, which is this longtime arts organization that serves an underserved community in Seattle. It specifically serves kids that are underage and can't get into a lot of music venues in town. And you have them right next door to this massive arena. And, you know, next week, Coldplay is coming and they're going to perform there. But then you sort of, if you look to the right a little bit, you'll see like a Vera Project that's been sort of, I walked by there recently, I couldn't even see them because there was so much construction equipment. And so it's just, it's a moment where we can sort of reflect on our priorities and try to make sure that, you know, all of the arts organizations that have made our city what it is are still able to survive the pandemic.
What I like about this story is, you know, this is going on throughout the city. There's so much construction, and we forget that, you know, the big construction projects cause traffic. They cause a lot of disruption. You know, another example would be the convention center expansion. You know, all of a sudden you're going all these different ways, or you can't go the normal way that you used to go. And, you know, you have to believe that it's worth it. I think these projects need to have that kind, and I know they do some of it, but it sounds like they didn't do enough here. They need to have that sort of upfront mitigation plan and meet with small groups and small businesses and really consider how much of an interruption they are going to be, because they are going to be an interruption, and they should probably, you know, pay for that, because it really does harm these others trying to do their work.
Yeah, and back in 2018, interestingly, Councilmember Herbold at Seattle City Council, she proposed an amendment that would have created a mitigation fund for tenants at the Seattle Center, but that amendment was ultimately withdrawn because the construction company felt like it would place a big financial burden on them. And it was sort of, it was just like one detail that was sort of overlooked during this whole process, but it speaks to Joni's point that these mitigation funds can prevent issues like we're seeing right now. We probably wouldn't be talking about this if that mitigation fund had been created.
Well, you know, the way they get all excited for sports venues, it seems like, and they start just slashing and dashing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, what's really fascinating about this story is that you have, I think, two like characteristics of Seattle at play. You have, you know, the Seattle that's like hungry. They're so hungry to have a pro team back in town. You know, I think there's whole people who are not over to Sonics leaving town, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, you have that characteristic of like, we really want to support the pro team, right? But then you have like Seattle's, you know, character as like a music center of grunge, and, you know, Vera Project is a big model for other, you know, all age venues across the country. And so I think you're just seeing like two very valuable things clashing, and it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how the city responds, because I think they both have a place, but, you know, who knows?
That's Mai Hoang, Chase Burns, and Joni Balter. Mai's going to tell us about the slow-moving landslide besides the pandemic in just a moment here. We've been talking about Climate Pledge Arena, which, as I say, has its home opener coming up on Saturday, October 23rd. By the way, this week, the Kraken were released from winlessness. They, after losing to the legendary hockey town of Las Vegas, they defeated the legendary hockey town of Nashville. And then here comes Vancouver. So stick around. We're going to continue figuring out what happened this week and what it all means with my guests. I'm Bill Radke. We're live streaming here on YouTube and Facebook, so you can join us anyhow you want, and we're going to be right back.
Support for KUOW comes from iTrellis, a technology solution consulting firm specializing in software design, development, DevOps, and data analytics, dedicated to understanding their clients' business strategy, building backlogs, and project teams. Learn more at iTrellis.com.
Carter Subaru supports KUOW's car donation program.
Hi, it's Ross Reynolds, executive producer for community engagement at KUOW. The thought of getting rid of a vehicle you love can be bittersweet. Well, now you can give your old vehicle new life by donating it to KUOW. Keep the programming you love alive and well with a tax-deductible donation of your car, truck, or RV. For details, call 1-866-KUOW-CAR.
The KUOW car donation program is powered by Carter Subaru in Ballard, Shoreline, and at cartersubaru.com.
57 degrees in Seattle. Still a chance of rain over the next couple of hours. We expect to hit a high today of 59. This is 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:33, and it's KUOW's Week in Review.
I'm Bill Radke, and you're here with political analyst Joni Balter and the Stranger editor Chase Burns and Crosscut's Eastern Washington reporter Mai Hoang. Mai, how is that slow motion landslide over by Yakima?
Still moving, according to
DNR.
Slightly, yeah. I mean, it's so this was a big story in 2018. So it was kind of nuts. We were kind of everywhere. I mean, you had New York Times reporters coming to report on this. I mean, it was kind of wild, and for good reason, because at the time it was moving like 1.6 feet a week, and there's this. And their home, this crack is located like right in the middle of the Yakima area. So, Union Gap's this town right next to Yakima. It's like the major retail center. So there's like a mall, there's a roller rink, there's like a bunch of restaurants. I mean, it could potentially have been really disastrous. But yeah, they kind of gave an update recently, and it sounds like, it's still moving. They're down to like 0.7, I think, feet a week, but it sounds like they're not expecting it to be this big event. They even said we're not expecting it to be a big event because it's kind of located, the ridge is kind of located above a quarry, and so there's kind of like debris accumulating there, and so they're thinking like as the debris accumulates, then it's just gonna like stop. We don't know when it's gonna stop, but that's kind of the expectation. But yeah, but it was kind of interesting. It was kind of a throwback because I'm like, oh, whoa, like I didn't expect to hear an update on this because, as I said, it was a big story a few years ago. And then we heard like not very much since then. So
I have a question. I wondered if the debris, just trying to stay with that story, the debris as it fills the quarry, does that block, do they have engineering scenarios that say that will then block further landslide?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like that debris accumulating will almost create kind of a barrier, and it kind of will just cause the crack to stop the slide going down. But I think people are still interested in it because this is not actually our first landslide, believe it or not. So in 2009, you guys probably heard the story. There was a big landslide off State Route 410 near Chinook Pass, and that really created some major issues. It kind of blocked the roadway. Basically, they had to create a detour for I think almost a year. So if you were driving on 410, you had to do this little detour around the Nile area of Chinook, on the Chinook Pass roadway. And it really inconvenienced people who lived on the Nile. And we have quite a few campgrounds and restaurants and other businesses in the area. It was really a big problem. And it really negatively affected. So I think that's on people's minds as well, is that, we have been affected by landslides in a negative way before. But it sounds like this one will not be as bad as the Chinook Pass landslide.
Yeah, didn't they evacuate dozens of people, and they kind of eventually looked at each other and shrugged, and I guess we'll go back.
Yeah, no, that's what happened. I mean, it was really crazy. It was a couple weeks where it just seemed like we were getting these on the hour updates about this, this landslide, and everyone, I mean, as I said, the New York Times is in town to like watch this crack, and but yeah, I mean, I think at this point right now, it's just something nice, not nice, but something amusing to look at when you're driving on Interstate 82. I mean, it's not something that's very compelling, but you're like, oh, there's the crack, and then you keep driving. So
yeah, it's down to less than 2 inches a week. So I don't know, the major motion picture Watching the Crack that was planned that movie might not even get funded anymore. It's
not even in development from what I understand.
It's not even in development.
I'm
pulling out.
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure why they felt compelled to update us, but I guess they just wanted to, set the record straight or something. So
sure. Well, here's a happier update on the pandemic. I'm not declaring it over by a long stretch. In fact, hospitals are still pushed, stressed, especially in Oregon, but even in Washington. But the case rates are going down. The vaccinations are going up. Almost 90% of state employees have verified that they're vaccinated. There's about to be more demand for vaccines in Seattle with not only mandates, but younger kids are going to be eligible. People are going to get eligible for a booster shot. Chase, I understand you're eager for a booster shot.
Yes, I will get a booster shot as soon as I can. I think the most relieving day.
And you're only 63 years old, right? So
I'm only 63.
Eligible.
Yeah. So I hope I can get it in the next few weeks. But one of the most relieving days for me, which I'm sure for most people, was when 2 weeks after my second shot, I just felt like so much anxiety that just went away that I didn't really realize had been lingering so heavily throughout this whole pandemic. And now we're reaching a point where we're not sure about the efficacy, how long the vaccines last. We know they're really effective with preventing coronavirus and especially with preventing hospitalizations. But we're at this weird point now where we're going to see more people getting booster shots. And I'm curious how the fall will go and how demand for booster shots will go as well. We know that there's those new vaccination sites that are about to open, one downtown and then soon in South Seattle and West Seattle. I read that the city says those could provide like 10,000 vaccinations per week with the ability to scale up. But like for reference, like Lumen Field could vaccinate like 150,000 people a week. And so obviously we're not having the same demand right now, but I'm curious what'll happen once the floodgates open with booster shots, let's say, and 63-year-olds like me can go and get them. How many people will sort of be rushing to go get them?
Well, we in this region, we love to beat up our government officials for all that they did wrong, and they deserve plenty of it. But, we did a fantastic job here getting people vaccinated. Seattle did a great job. King County did a great job. Washington State did a pretty good job. And now with boosters, it's going to be voluntary. But, this is something where you can count on government, business, unions to work together on and actually get a lot of people vaccinated and safe. And if you look at the kind of numbers that we have in this region, I just looked up King County. I think it was like 82% of people in King County 12 plus have their 2 shots. And that, remember, we used to talk about that. That's herd immunity. So that is doing very well. Seattle's even higher. They're about, last time I checked, about 84.5 or 85%. And so you can assume or hope that the booster program, which, will roll out hopefully as smooth, not at the other program didn't roll out that smoothly, but the boosters, there's a lot of vaccine around. And so they probably can roll out fairly smoothly. And I think our city, our county did a good job of reaching different areas of the city. I live in the South End. It was easy to get a test. It was easy to get a shot after, you did all these things, jump through all these hoops. So I think I have high hopes for this. This is something we actually seem to know what we're doing on.
It was easy enough for me to get my shot, although I did drive to the Rainier. I have a car and I have a flexible schedule. It was easier for me than it was for a lot of people to get their shots. And once again, the contrast is striking. Here we're talking about our massive vaccination rates in our area. You're in Yakima. What's the public COVID conversation like there?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting because I think if you were to base it on the news of people like protesting vaccine mandates and mask mandates and candidates talking about government overreach, you would think like, oh, vaccine rates must be kind of low, but actually in Yakima County, we're almost at 72% of residents 18 or 16 and up that have initiated vaccination, and we're at 69% above 12. So I mean, there's some Republicans getting their shots in Yakima County, and there's and it's actually one of the higher counties within our area. So we're higher than like Kittitas and Benton, but they're not that much lower. I would say the counties that are really low are in, like the really rural parts of Eastern Washington. So like Ferry County or Adams, or those counties where they're really not interested. But Yakima County, we're getting up there, and that number is increasing every day. But I think there's definitely a conversation about mandates. Mandates are not held very highly here. There are candidates in our commissioner race running on that. It's very interesting because our county commissioner race, we have two candidates that essentially have the same viewpoint. They're against vaccine mandates, but one, I think we were talking about this with the mayor race with Bruce Harrell wants to kind of work with the government and express, criticism. And then, so we have one candidate, LaDon Lynn, who's, I think, more of that candidate. Like, he wants to work with Ensley, not so much like push back. And then we have kind of his opponent, Autumn Torres, who's very much like government overreach. We need to fight back. We need to fight for our freedoms. And so she's more of that pushback Ensley candidate. So it's very interesting because the vaccine numbers would tell you that like the people who are not getting vaccinated is in the minority, but you might not know that if you're reading our stories about protest, about mandates. So
well, do we know what the polls are saying about how people likely to vote actually feel about how they want their politicians to talk about vaccine mandates? Because it's one thing, sort of the inter-party, I've got to outflank this opponent, but that could be out of step with the public. As you're saying, there's plenty of people Republicans getting vaccinated. So can we tell what the polls are showing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any hard numbers, but I mean, what I can tell you is that, Yakima County is much more blue. I mean, it's definitely not a blue county by any means, but if you looked at the Biden presidential election, many areas in Yakima voted for Biden, and you have Latinx voters and Native voters who voted Democratic. And so, those voters, right now with the county commissioner, we have one more year where it's a county-wide election, and then commissioners go on a district-based system next year, but we have one more year where it's county-based. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I could see those Democrats, those leaning more liberal in Yakima County, going for a candidate like LaDon Lynn rather than a person like Autumn Torres, who's much more this personal freedoms, pushback against Ensley stance. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be close, to be honest.
Well, the crazy thing about vaccine mandates is they work. And we've seen this in private industry, and we've seen this in some of the government mandates already. So an example I'll use is United Airlines. I mean, they were tough. They said you had to be vaccinated, and there was a little bit of noise about no, we're not, but I think they're at 90% right now. So vaccine mandates, they're popular in many parts of the state, not all of them, of course, but they work and they provide public safety, and it's a good idea. It's a good thing to do.
I mean, I think when push comes to shove, you have to have a job. Like, most people can't afford to quit their jobs. I mean, they'll speak a big game and they'll say, I'm not going to stand for this. But I mean, ultimately, you still have to pay your mortgage. You have to feed your kids, and so, I mean, definitely over here, like, I read a story in the Yakima Herald that the big hospital, Yakima Valley Memorial, like a good chunk of their employees are vaccinated. So, I definitely agree with you, Joni, that, I think when push comes to shove, people will get their shots and move on. So
everybody but the WSU coach, is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
still dancing around. Oh,
supposedly a religious exemption filing. Okay, well, we've got what they call Mandate Monday coming up here in just a few days. So before we leave the pandemic, anybody want to hazard any predictions of whether people are going to either quit or get fired in such numbers that public services or businesses' survivability, or there's going to be big impacts? Or is it just going to be, like you say, they work, people talk a big game, this is going to pass and be not that big a deal?
I also think there are going to be exemptions. I think it doesn't seem like, and it's interesting. I'm interested in hearing what these exemptions are and what they look like. I don't know, but my impression from talking to some school board people and hospital people is that, for the most part, they do accept exemptions. I mean, they reject them too, but I think, so there's going to be a percentage of that, like, non-vaccinated population that will get the exemptions. And then I think there's going to be, the rest are going to get the vaccination because they don't feel strongly enough to quit. So I could see it being inconvenient, but I don't think I think it's a lot of big talk. I don't think the actions will match that big talk ultimately.
Well, there's one more overlay to this for sure. We have a lot of labor shortages in a lot of different places, like the ferry system and all these different places. And so, how quickly are they going to fire employees where they're cutting ferry runs, or, it's not the easiest thing to do. But, I think it'll be important to see what percentages you end up with, because people definitely, should I get a shot or should I lose my job? That, not very many people are going to say, okay, I'll just see my chances out in the job market. Yeah. But there will be some. And so it'll really be a tough calculation. Can we, whatever entity we are, private or public, can we go forward with fewer employees if we're going to lay them off, or are we going to give them, cooling off period, or give them another chance, or at least show us your first shot, something like that. Something, right. A little dancing away for both sides.
Chase, anything to add before we take a break?
I would just say I think the percentages across the board are probably going to raise of people who are submitting vaccination proof. And we saw that with like the Washington State Patrol. And yesterday in Inslee's press conference, he just reiterated that, the mandates are there because they protect lives. And, they've had people who have died in different industries across the board because of the coronavirus. And that creates an empty position as well that needs to be filled. And so it's to protect people and their families.
Chase Burns at The Stranger. Joni Balter is here with us, columnist Joni Balter, Crosscut's Mai Hoang, and we're going to take a short break and come back for our final push here at the end of Week in Review. Don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from the law firm of Miller Nash, new name and website with the same commitment to serving the legal needs of businesses and communities throughout the Pacific Northwest. More info at their new website at millernash.com.
I'm Paul Henley, host of BBC NewsHour. On today's programme, reaction to the stabbing to death of a serving British Member of Parliament as he held a regular meeting with his constituents, and the aftermath of another deadly bomb attack in Afghanistan.
BBC NewsHour begins this afternoon at 1 o'clock, right after Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Murano Senior Living, a Seattle-based leisure care community now celebrating their grand opening, featuring independent assisted living and their memory care OPO program, located on First Hill. More information and tour scheduling at MuranoSeniorLiving.com.
57 degrees in Seattle. Chance of rain is with us through the weekend, with rain considered likely on Sunday. It's 12:50, and this is KUOW's Week in Review.
I'm Bill Radke. I'm listening closely to my journalist guests. I'm also staring at them on YouTube and Facebook. We're live streaming this program, Week in Review. Just search KUOW Public Radio. And I'm talking about The Stranger's Chase Burns, political analyst and columnist Joni Balter, and Crosscut's Eastern Washington reporter Mai Hoang. Mai, I know most of the hops grown in the U.S. are from just about where you are now, from the Yakima Valley. And I remember the wildfires made some wine grapes taste smoky. Is our beer going to taste smoky? And is that giant Central Washington hops industry in trouble here, or what?
I mean, I think it's a wait and see for sure. We haven't researched as much on hops, and there's impact of wildfire smoke on hops. It's been a much more of a thing for wine grapes. It really became an issue last year. If you remember, Labor Day weekend, we had massive fires across the Northwest. If you went outside, it looked like we were at the end of the world, kind of that orange sky. So we had really hazardous smoke conditions for several weeks in our region. And so what was happening was that when processors like Yakima Chief Hops started, processing hops, they noticed this distinct, smoky smell coming from their batches of hops that they were getting from their growers. And so it kind of created, I was talking to the research folks, the sensory folks at Yakima Chief Hops, and they were saying like, oh, it turned into an impromptu research project. They were not planning on doing this, but it kind of became one. So they basically, segregated the hops to make sure it wasn't getting to, local breweries. And then they've been spending several months. And so they did find detectable, smoke compounds in beer, but they couldn't really detect whether it created like issues as far as like beer quality or the taste. And so, there's continuing to research it. And then there's actually a study at Oregon State University. They're teaming up with New Belgium of Colorado. They make a really popular Fat Tire beer, and Joni Balter of another hop supplier in our area. They're also doing a wildfire smoke study as well. So I think the conclusion is it's inconclusive, and we shall see what will happen.
I do like the Fat Tire, which makes me basic. And Chase, I know that you're also, we got the fresh hops coming in here just after the harvest, and you're a hops fan. You're interested in the smoke.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this whole hops, like the wet hops versus dry hops thing, until I moved to this area. And we had a beer reporter at The Stranger who would talk a lot about this region and how unique it is. And I'm just like amazed with the sort of special crops that we can make in this area. And I really hope that these mega fires don't wreck our unique industry,
Well, I think, we didn't smoke out this year as much as we could have, or at least as much as a lot of us thought we would. And we had that heat dome back in June. It just seemed like it was going to be so hot and so smoky. We didn't have that year, but it does seem that smoke is now the norm if you look back 6-7 years, and it's not the exception. And you could feel this a lot of places in the West this summer. Eastern Washington, certainly. I go over to Chelan. It didn't have as many days as I thought it would, but it had its predictable smoky days. Sun Valley, Idaho, Colorado, climate change, as we always talked about it was far off, at least by a couple years or a lot of years, but it does seem like it's just here right now in our faces. So these industries that you're writing about, Mai, they're going to have a kind of a backup plan of some sort, or some way of dealing with the smoky summers, because they seem like they're not going away.
Yeah, and that's and they're already talking about it. So yeah, I wrote in Crosscut this week. We actually ran a series about climate change and various commodities that go into our beverages. So I did hops. My colleague Hannah Weinberg did cider grapes, and then we had another store, or cider grapes, cider apples, and then we had another store about wine grapes. And it was very fascinating to talk about the hop industry. I have covered the hop harvest for years when I worked at the Yakima Herald, and it was very interesting to see this other side where they're having conversations about life cycle assessments, and Yakima Chief Hops is doing a carbon footprint and water usage assessment, and they're measuring how much water they're using, or measuring how much what their carbon footprint is. So the hop industry is really they're very aware that there could be big consequences if they don't take action. So I think that's underway.
On the other hand, smoked salmon, smoked cheddar, smoked what else, paprika. I mean, some products, they just lean into the smokiness. They make it, it's marketing, baby.
They tap the smokiness.
Exactly. Okay, it's time to, we're close to the end of our week in review. So it's time to leave our listeners with a smile. Sometimes the news doesn't lend itself to that. So I always try to make room for what's making us smile this week. Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket went up again this week, and this time the original Captain Kirk was on board. And after landing, standing by the capsule in the West Texas desert, William Shatner tearfully thanked Jeff Bezos. And what I was expecting Shatner to say was how, seeing the little blue ball, seeing Earth from a distance gave him a sense of peace and hope. Instead, Shatner described the blue sky we have over us like a comforter getting ripped away.
And you're looking into blackness, into black ugliness. And you look down, there's the blue down there, and the black up there, and it's.
Can you hear?
Is there
by the
death?
way,
I don't know.
Can you hear the rich people laughing in the background while, giggling about their trip while 90-year-old Bill Shatner is peering into the black ugliness. What is it? More, Bill.
Is there death? I don't know. Is that death? Is that the way death is? Whoop, and it's gone. Jesus.
That was fantastic. That was a
great.
real reaction from Captain Kirk. That made me smile. Eddie, how about you all?
It's smile worthy. It's smile worthy. I'm sort of personally.
It's a smile worthy as the black ugliness. Game. This is on a relative scale. Yes, Joni.
No, what makes me smile is this whole month of October, because I basically celebrate Halloween for the whole month.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the candy. Yeah, I'm into the candy. That's not it. It's the lights. It's the mood. It's seeing everybody just kind of have their, fun with their yards and their porches, and, just putting on the costumes all month long.
Yeah, we look at the bright side of death, much like Bill Shatner does. Anybody else got something to make a smile here in the last few seconds?
Bill, do you remember the game Animal Crossing? We talked about it a lot last year.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So Animal Crossing took over the world last year. It was a huge game that people played during the pandemic. It sort of went away because people get tired of the game. But this morning they released an epic, 20-minute long video about how they're creating this gigantic update to the game. And my world has been wrecked. You can change the light fixtures in your homes in this game. It's all really mundane stuff that drives people just nuts. And I'm just preparing everyone that the Animal Crossing fever is about to come back.
Yeah,
Fever.
Absolutely. I agree. I actually was playing a lot, and now my daughter has taken over my Switch, so I might have to steal it back from her. So she's been using it. So anyway, so what makes me smile is I know everyone's like hockey fever here, but I'm actually a figure skating fan, and figure skating season's underway, and it's the big Olympic year. So it's gonna be exciting. So I'm gonna try to be a hockey fan too, because I like the merch. So, but yeah, figure skating.
Do it for the merch. That is Mai Hoang, Central and Eastern Washington reporter at Crosscut, and Chase Burns, editor at The Stranger, Joni Balter, political analyst and contributing columnist. And the whole show is produced by Alec Cowan and Sarah Leibovitz, with social media and live streaming from Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu. And I appreciate you listening. I'm Bill Radke, and I'm looking forward to having you back for another week in review. Great job, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill.